We are going to be looking at Proverbs 31 for 2 weeks. I can try to spiritualize that, but here's how that happened. So I got to marry my son to his new wife about 3 weeks ago. Then last week I got to marry Nathan, Pastor Nathan's daughter, to her new husband. And so when I sat down on Monday to pick a proverb, I had weddings on my mind, I had marriage on my mind, choosing well who to marry, all of that was on my mind. And so I chose Proverbs 31. Guess who else had marriage and weddings and making good choices on his mind? Pastor Nathan. He was a part of both those weddings, and he's going to preach next week, and so he started studying this past week. And at staff meeting on Tuesday, I just mentioned, I said, hey, I'm going to preach on Proverbs 31 this coming week, and Nathan declared that that's where he was going in 2 weeks. And so that's how it happened, nothing super spiritual there. Typically, that's when I throw my weight around, and I would say to Nathan, you need to choose a different sermon. I'm just kidding, I never throw my weight around. I really don't think I do. But when Nathan and I talked about it, we saw that we were actually going two different directions, and really love the direction he's going to go next week. And so for that reason, it's a two-parter. So before we study this passage, I want to mention something important, I think, and that is that this isn't primarily a passage exhorting wives how to live. That isn't the main message of this passage. This proverb was written by King Lemuel. We don't know exactly who that is. Some have suggested that's another name that Solomon went by, but we don't know. But that's who's writing this. And what he's doing in Proverbs 31 is he's actually recounting wisdom that his mother gave him. In fact, if you look at verse 1 of Proverbs 31, it says, "The words of King Lemuel, an oracle, were wise sayings," right, that his mother taught him. So these are wise words that a mother gave to her son who was to be king or was king. And you can hear the mother's heart in the very central verse or idea of this entire passage. This passage, 10 through 31, is written in kind of a chiastic structure. And what that means is that each line has a corresponding line at the very end. And we're not going to look at this very long, but I just wanted to show you kind of how this structure looks. And then in the very center of the passage, you have one statement that doesn't have a parallel. And that is the main point, and it takes one verse to make that main point. And so the main point, or the central line in the passage, is verse 23. "Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land." And I would say that's the heart of this mother, is she wants her son to choose well who he marries, because she feels like who he marries is going to have an impact on the way all of society views him and honors him. And I think all mothers in the room could relate to that. If you have a son, you've given that same advice. Hey, this is very important. Choose well. It's going to have a great impact on you and the way society views your family. But that's the main heart, and I'm just pointing this out because that's the primary audience. These are words that a mother gave to her son, and I think that's important to start with. Now, the passage does, of course, on a secondary level, give vision for, I would say, wives or young women who may become wives one day. And I want to frame that very carefully because I know that this passage can potentially feel very discouraging to women and to wives, because it can feel like just an absolutely impossible vision to carry out perfectly. And I want to just be frank up front. It is. It is an absolutely impossible vision, this ideal, excellent wife. It's impossible to carry out perfectly. Just to state some things about the passage here, she's the perfect businesswoman, right? She's the perfect land broker. She's the perfect seamstress. And on top of all that, apparently she doesn't need to sleep like the rest of us need to sleep. Because it says in the passage, she rises while it's yet night, and we have no idea about her bedtime, if she even has a bedtime, because all we know is in verse 18, it says that her lamp never goes out at night. So I'm just saying this wife described in this passage is too good to be true. It is a perfect standard. One of the ways to understand the book of Proverbs is that it begins with the voice of a woman, right? Lady Wisdom, instructing us on how to be wise. And then it ends with this picture of the perfect embodiment of all that wisdom in a wife. But that's the point. It's perfect. This is perfect. She's perfect. See, this is one of those passages, and there are several in the Bible that show us the ideal. And something that honestly, no wife in the room is going to perfectly attain or live out this image. And I would say, in the same way that no husband in the room right now is going to perfectly live out the love that Jesus had for the church. I rarely do a wedding without grounding it in Ephesians chapter 5, where it says to us as husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. I am humbled and sobered by that every time I read that. Every time I read that, I have to confess sin. It is the ideal, but I love it. And I absolutely need it as a husband. And we need these passages that lay out this perfect picture, this ideal for us to get a vision. Timothy Keller writes this. He says, those who are saved by Christ love these texts as guides to pleasing and resembling the one who saved us. The gospel produces people who are eager to obey those patterns and not to be crushed by them. And I would say this is why it's so important to live in light of the grace and the mercy of God every single day, because we can love these ideals if we know that there is grace and mercy every day for how we don't meet them, right? How we don't live them. So all of that was just to qualify, right? So we'll look at the passage. As we look at these verses, I would say we'll see 6 different qualities or features to an excellent wife. And the first one is that she is priceless. Look at verses 10 and 12. It says, an excellent wife, who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Right away, that word excellent, that's the adjective that frames the entire passage. The world is filled with wives. The king's mom wants him to find an excellent wife in particular. The word excellent is the word for strength and might. It's an interesting word to use here because it's usually used to describe like military strength or, like the power and the reliability of a soldier, somebody who is dependable. One of the best compliments I think that a man can give to another man, we'll say, is to say to that person, I would want you in my foxhole. I would want you in my foxhole. And I would say that gets us really close to what's being said about this wife, that she's an excellent wife. The king's mom is saying to her son, there are women out there that you want in your foxhole, that you want in your home, that you want partnered with you, shoulder to shoulder as you do life. There are women out there that are dependable, that are strong, that are capable, that are smart, that will work hard with you as you work hard. You want that kind of a wife. And she's saying to him, having an excellent wife, having that wife is far more precious, my son. It's far more precious than having wealth, right, than jewels, than having all worldly goods. You want that wife. It will have a much deeper impact on your life. And she's also saying to her son here, and they're hard to find. They are the exception. They're not the rule. This is wrapped up in that phrase right away, who can find? When it says who can find, if I could speak to some of the young men in the room, some of you young men, I think, are probably not finding this particular woman because you're not even looking for this particular woman. You're looking for pretty. I think it's a tendency or a temptation that a lot of times young men who aren't married face, but they're tempted to prioritize physical attraction. Or sometimes it's like the only priority as they're looking for someone that they might possibly marry. And I want to warn you. I want to warn the young men in the room that might be prioritizing that above everything else, or that's the only thing you're looking for. I've done marriage counseling for enough years to know several men who married the person they married primarily because of how she looked, only to find themselves in a very unhappy marriage because they married somebody who wasn't an excellent wife, right? She didn't have the work ethic that we're going to look at. She didn't have the character. She didn't fear the Lord and love Jesus first in her heart. And to be clear, I'm not picking on wives here. Most of the marriage issues I've worked with over the years, at the center of that issue have been stubborn or selfish men. That's not my point in saying that. And I'm also not saying looks shouldn't matter. I really do think you should be attracted to the person that you marry. To me, it just almost, I don't know how it would honor the other person if your attitude was, well, I fell on my sword, I guess, and right, I married somebody that I have no attraction to whatsoever. Who would want that, right? So I'm not suggesting that either. Staying close to the text, though, what I hear the king's mom saying to her son is, know what is truly precious. Know what is valuable. When you go into looking for a wife, or when you young women go into looking for a husband, know what matters, right? Know what's going to have the biggest impact on your life. For at times, there's people in this room that have been married 60 plus years. That's a long time. Know what matters. Know what is more precious than jewels. So look for someone with excellence. Look for someone, verse 11, that you can completely trust, right? The heart of her husband trusts in her. Look for someone, verse 12, who is genuinely a good person, right? She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Next, an excellent wife is also industrious. And this is primarily, I believe, the direction that Nathan will go. If he wasn't, he'll now need to go because we're going to cover this very briefly. But it really is the quality that gets the most ink in our passage. It's the point of verses 13 through 22, 24 and 25, and verse 27. Just for an example, we're just going to look at two verses. Look at 19 and 20 with me. It says, she puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Now, I had to look those words up, but the distaff and the spindle apparently are two different aspects or elements to the machine that sews. That's my best attempt at explaining that. But the point is that this woman is hardworking and amazingly good at sewing and providing clothing for herself, her family. But it also is making the point that everything that she does, her hard work, her industriousness, is not just for the good of her own house, her own home. It's also for the good of the poor and the needy and of all society. And like I said, Pastor Nathan, I believe, will go there next week. I just want to be really clear. This is not saying that to be an excellent wife, you have to know how to sew, right? That's so far from the point. The point isn't that you women or us men have to be good or amazing at everything. That's not the point. The point here is that an excellent wife is hardworking, right? She is industrious, and she is shoulder to shoulder with her husband. And they're pulling in the same direction. They're not in competition, right? They're working together. I would suggest it's the picture of Genesis 1 and 2. Now, we live in the picture of Genesis 3 forward, but this is the picture of Genesis 1 and 2, where husbands and wives are complementary pairs. And the picture is, and this is still true today, both the husband and wife are equally vital to the needs and the success of the home and of society in general. And so this proverb, I would say, if we're going to stay as close to the text as possible, the proverb is calling men and women, but it's calling a son, right? Again, to see the importance and the industry and the value of the output of all women, right? And if you see a woman, or if your wife is the kind of wife that works hard and really contributes and is walking shoulder to shoulder with you, that's what you want. Honor that. But if you're a young man, look for that. We'll come back to that. The next thing about an excellent wife here is that, again, it says that she brings honor to her husband. This is verse 23. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So we already talked about this. This is the center of the chiastic structure. It is the main point. The mother is telling her son, look for this kind of woman to be your wife. It will have a great bearing on how all of society views you and respects you. This is not the idea that behind every good man is a good woman. I would say this is more the idea that if you see a man that society honors, and one of the things that you'd be right to do is to look at the wife and see that she's given him a tremendous gift. And to really credit the wife and to honor the wife, because a lot of the honor that society gives to the man is something that the woman, his wife, has directly given to him as a gift, just by being a godly wife. She's contributed to the way that others look at him. This is the only time I'm talking about my wife during this sermon on Proverbs 31, but years ago, I was applying for my first pastoral position. So we were in seminary applying in Ames, Iowa, and the church called one of my references. This is my favorite professor. I was a TA for him in his Greek class, and I wasn't smart enough to do that, but I loved him so much I said yes. But I love this man. He's, to this day, one of my favorite professors. And he told the search team, and I know this because they told me what he said. He told the search team, I'm just going to cut to the chase, the best thing Zeke has going for him is Jamie. Now, he didn't mention to them that I was the student body president, which I happened to be. Right? He didn't mention to them that I had made A's in his class, which I happened to make. He mentioned to them, wait until you get to know Jamie. And you're laughing, and that's funny because you get it. Those of you that know my wife, right? It's very true how a good husband and a good wife, I would say, bring honor to each other and to the home by how they love the Lord and conduct themselves in public. Moving on. An excellent wife speaks wise things. Look at 25 and 26. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. An excellent wife speaks wise things. This is, when you understand the book of Proverbs, and we did look at this closely together, they speak wise things because they have the fear of the Lord in their hearts. This is how the book of Proverbs opens up. Our path toward gaining wisdom and walking in wisdom starts, continues, and finishes with fearing and loving and honoring the Lord. And so it is making that statement about this excellent wife. The fear of the Lord is the operating system of her heart, right? Her inner life is ordered. It is ordered and it is alive because she worships the Lord. He is her priority, even more than her husband. Not that the two are in conflict, but the Lord is the most important thing in her life. This is connected to the statement in verse 25 because it is her trust and hope in the Lord that allows her to laugh at the time to come. It says in verse 25, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. This isn't a mocking laugh. It's not a laugh of ignorance, like foolishness. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. This is a laugh that flows from the joy in her heart because she knows the Lord is sovereign and he loves her. And he's only and always good. And he has a purpose for her tomorrow, whether she knows it or not. And we all know life's uncertain. We all know that tomorrow will bring new troubles, that we don't know what they are today. This is saying that the excellent wife takes all the uncertainties of tomorrow, looks into the face of God, and her joy is maintained because of her trust in the Lord, because of the fear that she has. And when I started here at Heartland, I didn't ask for permission to say this. I hope it's okay. But when I started here at Heartland, I was 35. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was full of ideas and full of plans. And if I'm honest with you, full of anxiety, definitely for every Sunday morning. But just what if this doesn't work, right? What if this fails? And the only other person on staff when I was hired was Greta Swanson. And I remember I would feel anxious and I would walk down the hall and I would, walk into Greta's office and she would sit with me and she would talk with me and she would pray with me. And if you know Greta, she would always hug me. I would always get one of those hugs. And without fail, every time I would spend time with Greta, it would put everything in perspective. And I would just have this deep, deep sense that this is actually not about me at all. This is all the Lord's, right? This is his church. The word promises, he promises it will prevail. And I don't have to worry about what tomorrow will bring because he will be there with us. And that's a Proverbs 31 quality in a woman. And may God raise up more and more Greta Swansons in this world. An excellent wife is honored in the eyes of her husband and children. Look at 28 through 30 with me. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also as he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. This room is filled with children who are absolutely positive their mother is the best mother in the world. This room also has many men, husbands, who think, man, I must have I cheat the system, right? I beat the system. I married the best woman in the world. That's the idea behind 28 through 30. that those who are in her home think that she is just the absolute best, most excellent wife and mother. And let me encourage you mothers and wives with this, because you are most who you are in the home, right? Like we can put on our church clothes, and we can, put on the face we want when we come to church on Sundays, or we're out in the public during the week, but you really can't maintain all of that in the home. You are who you are in the home, and your kids and your husband sees who you are in the home, and yet they absolutely adore you. The sun rises and sets with some of you moms and women in this room, and is the grace of God in that? Absolutely. Absolutely. But enjoy it. I go back to the statement I made on husbands loving your wives as Christ loved the church. We husbands could just do nothing but focus on how we fail to live that out, and the list would be exponentially, if not infinitely long, right? Or we can actually listen to how our kids love us, right? Or how our wives love us and honor us, and we can enjoy the grace and the mercy of God in that. Again, I'm just trying to be clear. This is not about being perfect. This is about seeing the ideal, aiming at that ideal, but then walking in the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness of God every day. And if this is your mother, if what I just said is true, and you're one of these young people that are like, yeah, I know she's the right, like he might be saying they're all the best, but I know she's the best. If you're thinking that your mom is excellent, or as a husband you're thinking that your wife, that you beat the system and married the best, there's a command in this for us in verse 30. It says, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. This week, I want you to praise them. I want you to tell them what you love about them and what is so honorable about them and how their faith has encouraged you. I want you to be vocal about it and intentional. The final thing about this excellent wife is that she has an impact on society. And again, I think this will tie into what Nathan will say next week. But look at verse 31. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. I say this quite a bit, and I'm somewhat joking when I say to the many incredible wives and mothers in the room, I've said to a number of you, you should get a medal or something. But you don't get medals. It doesn't work that way. You don't get much recognition at all. Sometimes the most excellent wives among us work primarily at home, one of the most noble and important roles in our entire society, and you don't get paid anything, right? Or at least not with money. This verse, and I would say this proverb, suggests that you get rewarded in part by the impact that you see that you have played in society. Yes, the home, but outside of the home, like in all of society. This phrase here, let her works praise her in the gates, that's a very poignant phrase. That is a phrase directing our attention to the welfare of the city. And this idea that an excellent wife or excellent wives together in community have tremendous impact in all of society, right? All of the city. The aim of the book of Proverbs is to change society. It's to change culture by helping husbands and wives and children gain wisdom and live for God, like grow in wisdom and in the fear of the Lord. It really is to increase shalom. Like our peace with God, our peace with each other, the welfare of the city, of all creation. How the husband and the wife go, the children will go. How the children go, that's society, right? They're the next generation of society. They are culture. And so what happens in a marriage and what happens in the home that sends those children out, it's a very simple equation, right? That impacts society. That impacts the future of the city and the state. Look at where we are today. Largely, we are an angry society, right? We are mean-spirited. We don't any longer debate and discuss ideas in a respectable way. We don't do that anymore, right? We argue, we yell, we dehumanize the other side. Sometimes we shoot at the other side. Both sides of the political spectrum. It happens in the classroom, right? It happens when parents sit in bleachers. We're not at a good place in society. You know the best way to get to a good place as a society? It's husbands that love their wives as Christ loves the church. Right? It's men that are looking for and they're celebrating the right qualities and the right values in women. It's women who are focusing on being excellent wives. It's children who are committed to obeying their parents. We focus on that very organically and then watch where society goes. It can go a good place. But this proverb is celebrating the power that an excellent wife or a community of excellent wives can have on the entire city or society. Let me close with a few encouragements just for the young men and the young women in the room, because again, I feel like that's staying closest to the passage. You young people, I cannot stress strongly enough how important it is to be wise about who you choose to date and to marry. Next to your decision of what to do with Jesus, the decision of the kind of person you're going to pursue and marry will have the greatest impact on your thoughts, your feelings, your future, and it may be a future of 65 years with that person. The old in the room get this. We either get this because we've enjoyed a good, vibrant, long marriage, or because we've experienced difficulties and pain in marriage. But all the old in the room would be up here saying the same thing. Be wise. Look for the right things. Involve wise people in your journey. Young men, at the point that it's appropriate to look for a spouse, look for a young woman who, in your opinion, is incredibly respectable. Right? She's honorable. That she, even if her faith is young, she loves the Lord. She fears the Lord. She has a great work ethic. And she loves to help those in need. Young women, when guys start asking you out, look for the ones whose mothers and fathers, or perhaps pastors and youth leaders, taught them to value character and Christ-likeness over looks. Look for the ones who love and fear the Lord and that you think, you can picture, that you believe will try by grace to love you all of your life, all of your married life, as Christ loved the church. Primarily, that's a very sacrificial, other-centered love. And until that day, to the boys and the girls in the room, prioritize spiritual growth and godly character over everything. Young men, before it's time to ask a girl out, it's time to become the kind of guy that an excellent young woman would actually say, yes, I'd like to go out with you. And prioritize that, not merely for the purpose of getting married or going out on a date, but because, trust me on this, there is incredible joy in knowing and honoring the Lord. And if you find that joy, young men and young women, that will be the most attractive quality about you to the right person. Let's pray. Father, I do pray for the young men and young women in this room that you would, by your word, through your Spirit, give them a vision for what is truly precious in a spouse, and to help them carry that vision and to focus on those qualities for themselves as they're growing, and to wait patiently with faith. Wait patiently on you for that person. And we ask in Jesus' name, amen.